Okay, hi guys. I'm designing a cottage for my friend's family, and I've been doing it for about 6 months now. Well, actually, 8 months, but 2 months ago I did a major presentation to the family, and I thought it would be a good idea to make a documentation of what I've done so far in the design. Just to look back on it one day, maybe, or to see how far I've come in a few years or something like that. But this is the Lake Cottage, and this is the presentation that I gave to the family 2 months ago in July. And it basically summarizes my design philosophy, how I approach the design, and the conceptual design that I came up with. So yeah, let's get into it. So in the presentation I did for the family, I first went through a timeline, my design methodology, what I'd done so far, and then spoke with them a bit to collect their thoughts and their desires and visions. Originally, I met with my friend's family at the beginning of the year, and the dad kind of gave me his ideas of what he thought the cottage should be. Now, the cottage is co-owned by his family and his sister's family, as well as their grandmother. So there's two sets of parents and a grandmother that are like the primary stakeholders. And with my friend's family, I had met with them 3 or 4 times and shown them the progress, and they were all on board with the design. And then so this presentation was the first time I was showing the design and what I'd done to the other side of the family, to get their thoughts and to show them really what I had in mind. So it was really important, even though I'd been working on the design for 6 months, to say that we are at the beginning of the conceptual design. I hadn't really talked to the other side of the family, the aunt and uncle, so I didn't really know them very well, and I didn't really know what their priorities were, what they had in mind for the cottage. And so I wanted to frame it in a way where I said, to say, like, we are at the beginning of conceptual design, and even though I'm going to show you quite a detailed looking design, there's still a lot of opportunity to talk about things, to figure out what you want, what's important to you, what your principal's goals are, and then later I'll be doing detailed design analysis, building permits, construction drawings, and then constructions. And it's like a 2-year process usually, at least a 2-year process. So it was important to frame that, even though this, as you'll see later, that it's quite in some ways a very detailed design, it's still at the conceptual phase. So from my friend's parents, their request was to have a 2-level cottage, well, like 1 level with a walkout basement, that had a great room for large family gatherings and a fireplace. And it was really important to the dad that there would be a screened-in porch, and that's so that the shoulder seasons could be used. Right now it's really only a summertime cottage, and he imagined, if you have a screen-in porch, you could go up earlier in the spring when the bugs are really bad. And in the fall, you could kind of still be outside or semi-outside and enjoy the cottage for a longer period of time. He also wanted an away room for watching TV, or somewhere to be quiet, so that I guess the intention behind this, the underlying theme, was that there'd be multiple different spaces. So you wouldn't all be you could all be collected in the great room, but you could also kind of partition off or go off to another room and have a bit of a more intimate moment with someone there. Being two levels, with the main floor being kind of the more public living, dining, kitchen area, and then the basement being where the bedrooms are. And he emphasized that there are two sets of parents and a grandmother, and there are 5 children, which are, the children are in their like 20s, early 30s. But there are very different sleep schedules. Like some people like to get up early, some people don't get up early. And so maintaining a separation so that people can sleep in or go to bed early without noise bothering them was important. Being 4-season, building envelopes so that you have the flexibility to use it year round. You're not constrained to just using it in the summer. And he wanted to also design the site and figure out a plan, a master plan for the site, so that if there's a future, like if there are grandchildren or if there's a future change, like a need to expand, that there is a dedicated space and plan for where a garage and bunkie would go. Maybe a boat ramp too, if you could get a boat into the lake. So that's what kind of he laid out at the very first meeting. And my design vision, what I was interested in, was exploring light through natural daylighting. The cottage is in a forest, and so there are quite tall trees around it, so there's not a lot of natural daylight coming in. So it's really important to me that I think about natural daylighting, how you relate to the land as an optic to view to communicate with nature. So my architecture is focused largely on how the architecture becomes an optic to view the landscape and experience the landscape, not just view it, but also experience it. How you feel in tune with nature, and especially in a cottage, a second home, like how that building, how that architecture makes you feel in tune with nature, a part of nature, and a part of a larger landscape. Since it's a cottage and not like a primary residence, high durability, low maintenance was important to me. And though cost was not initially a primary driver, I did want to keep a very compact form that would be simple and pretty straightforward to build and construct. So I began the design by thinking about what does it mean to exist, and this is typically how I begin designs, by thinking about what's important, what is the space about. This is kind of a word map of things that I was thinking about, of like, how does the light and the wind become elements in the space to animate the space? How do we capture the passage of time? And it has a lot to do with how do you feel in the space? How do you bring out emotions, and how does intangible things like light become a character to the space? I also usually do a word map at the beginning of important terms. I don't know a lot of architects or architectural designers that focus on wording, but I tend to think about important words and organize the words into categories. So here we have 4 different categories: journey, activity, atmosphere, and material. And in each category, I'm thinking about important words that will to keep in mind as I'm coming up with the design. So, for example, architecture can be a journey of experiences, from the beginning of where you arrive at the site to the front door to your experience through the space. And so arrival sequence is a very important aspect of that, as is how it relates to the landscape and contemplating when you're sitting there just looking at the landscape. Activities is important from a programmatic point of view, to figure out and make sure that I'm capturing all of the activities that might happen at the cottage. So everything from spending time down at the lake to sitting around on a porch, lounging around, having dinner together, puzzles. This is a big puzzle family, watching TV, reading. Materiality is very important in terms of relating to the landscape. relating to the natural conditions, the local conditions, and the regionalism of the design. I'm based out of Vancouver, and this project is in Toronto, which I'm familiar with as well. But every part of the world has a different type of natural landscape, and it's important to relate to that. And lastly, the atmosphere is how the architecture feels, and it's a bit more intangible of what kind of feeling do you want to feel in the building when you're in it, and I'll get into that in a bit. So first is a sense of place. I wanted to relate it to the landscape to make a "you are here" moment of like you have left your mundane life, your 9-to-5 job, your daily life. You've driven 2 hours to this cottage. There's a "you are here" moment of I am in the landscape. I'm here. I'm feeling the seasons, the wind, the sun, the landscape, the environment. And I'm kind of resetting, refreshing my mind. The project is in the Muskoka region of Ontario. So it's about 4 to 5 hours north of Toronto, and it's at the edge of the Canadian Shield. So it's a region of rocks, lakes, and trees. Here are some kind of diagrams I was looking at kind of at a very large scale the Canadian Shield, how it was formed and how it formed the lakes and landscapes of the Muskoka region. There's like thousands and thousands of lakes here, and they all have little cottages on them. More specifically in the regional context, this is near the little town of Rosso, and you can see there's like tons of little lakes. The cottage is on a somewhat smaller of a lake. So then getting into the site scale, the site kind of faces northeast, and it kind of looks out onto the lake with an island towards the northeast, a point to the north. It is very much in the forest on the backside of a slope, so there's not a lot of, and it's very treed, so there's not a lot of sunlight that's coming in. These are some kind of photos of the existing cottage. It was built in the 1970s, like 50 years ago, maybe 40 years ago. It has become quite run down, and when I did this presentation, I actually had the opportunity to go out to the cottage and do the presentation in the cottage and see the cottage for myself. But yeah, the cottage is quite run down, and they're kind of ready for a new one. But you can see, like in the fall, the autumn colors in Muskoka are quite beautiful. This is a existing site plan. The existing cottage is quite close to the water, and it kind of encroaches on the side yard setback. And the original idea was to replace the cottage in the same footprint so that it could still stay close to the water. The property right now goes to the inner limit of the shore road allowance. So between this shore road allowance and the water originally was municipal land, and so your setback being 20 meters is supposed to be from that shore road allowance. And there was some discussion of whether to buy that shore road allowance or not. And so originally the plan was to maintain the same footprint so that you could kind of get around the bylaws and still stay close to the water. Whereas if you built a new cottage, you'd have to move 20 meters back from that shoreline road. But that changed later on. So I started thinking about circulation and journeys and how you get to the site, how people kind of arrive in the first 10 minutes and they probably drop off their things in the cottage and go straight down to the lake to check it out. And that's exactly what I did. You also have different journeys in the morning and the evening. Like in the morning, a lot of people will like get coffee and then go down to the dock to have a sit. It's like quite nice in the morning and very refreshing, not too cool in the summer at all. Towards the evening, there's a lot of back and forth between the dock and the cottage. And so there's a bit of consideration in the distance between the cottage and the dock and how people move through the landscape that is between the cottage and the dock as well. And again, thinking about apertures in the sense of how you move from one space to another, both physically and visually, in that landscape was something I was thinking about and kind of mapping out in diagrams. Some other things that I was thinking about are the central organization. So a lot of my architecture is focused on the emotive side of things, how architecture makes us feel, and less so as important as it is, but less so the kind of visual focus. So looking at how different levels of lighting will impact different spaces, how textures, smells, sounds will affect different spaces. And so these bubble diagrams, if it's a lighter blue, it's kind of a more public space, and then the darker blues are more private spaces. And so it's mapping out relative to each other where the more public spaces are and where the more private spaces are, and what kind of sensual effects each of those spaces will have. So the theme I came up with for this project is komorebi. And komorebi is a Japanese term that describes the way sunlight filters through a canopy of trees in the forest. And it's quite if you ever walked through the forest and felt like that starlight sprinkling of sunlight through the trees, that's komorebi. And it's an interesting effect and something I've been researching quite a bit. And it seemed appropriate for this cottage that is surrounded by all these tall trees. And thinking about how to filter sunlight into that space. At the same time, I wanted to capture the passage of time, both in daylight, daily, seasons, and generationally, because there are right now 3 generations. And so I was thinking about how does the filtering of sunlight through the trees really show us that time has changed, time is passing, time is moving. And that highlight, I wanted to be able to highlight that in the architecture, to allow the architecture to express to us the movement of the sun and the movement of the shadows and the changing of time. So this is the feeling, the passage of time, both every day and through the seasons. Especially since this cottage is going from what is right now a single summer season to the idea of having a 4-season cottage that you could go to at all year round. So in terms of atmosphere in architecture is how the building feels. It's how you feel when you first see it and how you feel when you're in it. So when you're in a small room versus a large room, when you're moving through it, how does it feel to you? And in architecture, there are multiple ways to create an atmosphere. And you can kind of look at these diagram bubbles and you kind of get a sense, a feeling from each one, right? Like certain ones like sounds and smells are a bit more active because you're seeing water in a waterfall fall down. So The mystery one is a bit, more quiet, more tame because it's darker and more calm. And so there are different ways to create atmosphere in architecture, and this diagram is to show the different sort of elements that build up that atmosphere. In architecture, in my design, there's a theme, atmosphere, and a narrative that combine to create the concept. And so the narrative for this design is an unfolding sequence of framed spatial structures to reveal the landscape. And what I mean by that is I wanted to specifically frame certain viewpoints, certain spots in the architecture that draw in the landscape and connect us to the landscape. And that's through visual, sensual, and lighting conditions. So I did a lot of thinking. I did a lot of drawing, sketching, research. I looked at some precedents and a lot of books. I read a lot of books, re-looked at a lot of books to make some sketches and stuff. And so the first concept was based on this idea that we keep the same footprint as the original cottage so that we can keep it in the same spot. And it doesn't have to move 20 meters further back to have a 20-meter setback from the property line. And the footprint is not large to begin with, but this was kind of what I could fit on the same footprint with all of the requests from the family. And keeping it quite modest and quite simple in form as well. So to begin with, the entrance is kind of centered here. Off to the side is a bathroom. And then there's a few steps up to a kitchen. And having a few steps up is important to me because I can have a Japanese genken entrance, which is kind of like an entranceway that's lower than the main living area to keep the dirt out. So having steps up from the entrance means that like you have a place to take off your shoes, but it keeps the dirt the dirt that comes on with your shoes contained within that space. And then you step up, and stepping up is a very powerful architectural moment to kind of focus yourself from having been outside, taking off your shoes, to stepping up and then coming into the space. So you're not just moving into the space horizontally, but you're moving into the space vertically. The second part to that is by coming down on the other side, it means that you can have bar seating at a kitchen counter where on one side, with the working side of the kitchen is a normal kitchen height, and then the other side is taller, so you don't have that extra like little pony wall to make the bar seating. It also means that the kitchen can look over the dining out towards the lake. The lake would be at the top of this screen here. So there was a few like reasons to do that step up and step down that I put in that were important to me. There's the living area here, fireplace with lots of glazing out to the lake. It's worth noting that north is to the top left, so your sun is kind of coming in from this area and then crossing over to this area. An away room on the same level, which with a TV, a desk area, if you're working from home, and a futon couch that can fold out and make a spare bedroom. And then the closed-in, screened-in patio being at the south end to get the most sunlight and to have a balanced warmth. Because if it was at like the north end of the building, it would be quite shaded and a lot cooler. And finally, if you go down the stairs, you end up down here where the main bedrooms are, mechanical laundry and another bathroom are. This was the first plan. The red outline is kind of the floor above and the outline of the existing cottage. It became apparent quite soon, though, that it would be worthwhile to buy that shoreline road allowance and to if we bought that shoreline road allowance, the setback would be from the shoreline, and 20 meters back is actually pretty much the same place as the cottage. You just have to shift the cottage over a bit so that it's not encroaching into the side yard setback. One of the other interesting, I guess, the other side, the uncle's side, had seen these beaver homes, which are like kit homes you can buy. And so I did an analysis to look at what the general footprint would be if you went with that option. Oops, sorry. Again, you end up with a foyer room, center entrance, laundry's kind of here, bathroom, great room, dining area, kitchen, 2 bedrooms on the same level. It's generally a bit smaller in footprint than the existing cottage, which is the red line. You could go down and have a walkout basement, or go up and have a bit of a loft. I didn't really go into a lot of detail on this idea because it's a kit home, so if the family decided to go with a kit home, like architecturally, there's really nothing for me to do because the supplier basically has already designed it for you, and you just pick out the finishes and stuff. So I did a lot more drawing and sketching, and I kind of was like, well, what happens if we don't need to stick on the same footprint? And discussing with the family, that became a more immediate realization. And they said, yeah, like, we looked into the cost, it's not too much, it's worth doing, let's pursue that route. So this is kind of, let's say, my design, the design that I settled with, and I wanted to that I presented to them as like, this is what I think it could be like. It's worth noting though that I did do 11 concepts. So this is the one that came out of 11 concepts. So I think I spoke a bit earlier about having a simple form, and so I started with this idea that the massing, the form of the cottage would be based on a very typical gable and shape. And from that, I wanted to pull up towards the sun so that the building is connected to the sun, but I also wanted to pull out to the lake so that it feels that you're closer to the lake. And I wanted to open up the inside to the outside, so there's this ambiguity of inside and outside space. And in doing all of this is largely in openings and screened openings that are formulated to connect to the landscape. These 6 diagrams illustrate the thinking about illumination from the sun downwards, because it's in that tall forest. So the sun's not really coming from the sides. It's coming largely from above. The convergence of air and wind and people, and how that flows through the architecture, making framed views out to the lake, which is obviously important, but also to the forest as well. How it's embedded in the hillside and the landscape to give it a bit more modesty, and how there are certain areas that are more private and enclosed, and other areas like the great room, the living room, that are quite empty and open, and there's a feeling of being in an emptiness that is filled with your presence. And then this last diagram is organizing the privacy so that at the south end, where the screened-in porch is going to be, is the most public, and then you're going to different levels of privacy as you go further north towards the darker, more enclosed end of the building. So this is the morphology of that design. So I looked at a lot at the landscape. So you have, as you come into the site, there's the cottage and the fireplace in the cottage. So that's kind of like camping beside the lake. And you're surrounded by this forest and these rocky outcroppings of the Canadian Shield. And out on the lake, there's an island that is important to the family as well. And so in making this 2-level cottage, you can relate that to the landscape by saying, well, the main living space is really a space to look out at the lake. And you have a screened-in porch and an away room, and if you have a loft as well, that's like being up in the trees. And down by the lake, there's like a seasonal dock, but there's an idea to have a bit of a patio there with like a fire pit, and that's kind of like going out to an island. It's on the site, you have the main cottage, but you have this separate area that's still relevant to the cottage, but not directly attached to it. And so I wanted to think about materials that would reflect those elements of the landscape. So you have a very strong wooden structure with openings that look out to the lake. You have a forested, like a loft that has a lot of filtered light through wooden slats that have that kohlrabi sense to them. The screened-in porch has flagstone on the ground, which is very relevant and reflective of the Canadian Shield. And then the patio that's like the island down by the lake, maybe it's pebbles and concrete, which is kind of like little islands in the sea or in the lakes. So thinking a bit about how the landscape feeds into the spatial layout of the architecture and is enhanced by materiality. So this is the design that resulted from that. It's an evolution of the first design, the first concept, and which isn't really a surprise. It's kind of saying, I'm going to take that. What it was taking that first concept and expanding upon it, saying, well, if I'm not constrained to the existing footprint, and I just give myself a bit of breathing space so that I can fit in the spaces without feeling constrained, what does that look like? So you come in the entrance, and it's a similar Genkan entrance with which would be like a more durable stone finished flooring where like the dirt can be. Now there's space for some wardrobes, for jackets kind of thing, closet wardrobes for jackets. It's a bit of a display area here, and that is kind of your first framed view. As you open that front door, you see a bit of a display at the far end of the Genkan. You turn the corner so that you're not seeing the whole, like, so that you're starting to reveal the rest of the cottage space. And this turning the corner is also 2 steps up again, so that you're entering into the cottage. And that is your second frame view, which looks over a stairwell that goes down over the living room and gives you your first glimpse out to the lake. Again, the kitchen is generally in the same spot. It's a bit larger now. so it's a bit more spacious. Still has the same bar seating with a step down to a dining area and the living room, and this pull out is kind of pulling out towards the lake to bring the lake closer in. There's 2 rooms to the side, both a bedroom study and an away room, and both are capable of being like extra bedrooms. If you have like your friends over or there's extra guests, you can have futons in there. And actually when I was talking with the family, it became apparent that this would be good for the grandmother, so that she doesn't have to go up and down the stairs to go to bed. We can have a bed in there for the grandmother, and so she's still on the main level. Shower, bathroom here as well, and then the screened-in porch, which is quite large. So the screened-in porch is now becoming like an outdoor living room. It's like having 2 living rooms, one for like the winter and the end of the night when you're just like really tired and relaxing, and one for the daytime in the summer where you want to be outside, or the spring when you want to be outside but maybe there's too many bugs. Or down the stairs, upstairs, so there's a stair here that goes up and circles around. I found that I had the space to put in a reading nook. There's quite a lot of readers in the family as well. And then a loft, which is another space for extra guests, or like maybe in the future grandchildren, a place where they can sleep. It ended up that the way the massing of the cottage ended up, where I could fit in this loft without having to like add on to the building. So I was like, yeah, let's fit that loft in. Like there wasn't really it wasn't like adding on another volume to the building. It was already contained in the volume of the space. And so downstairs there's quite a large sitting area, and then 3 bedrooms, and then a laundry, washroom, and bath. There's also an exit here and a patio. So the idea is if you come from the lake and you've just been outside, you don't have to trample through the whole cottage to get to your bedroom to change and wash. You can come in through the basement, get your clothes from your bedroom, and then go into the bath area to change. The laundry is right there, so you're not also bringing, like, the laundry's close to the bedroom, so you're not carrying your stuff all the way through the bedrooms. If there's like towels, they're kind of living in a very contained space between the laundry room and like the bench beside the door or outside. They're not having to be like left all over the place and carried from one place to another place kind of thing. And so I was thinking about the materiality of the flooring, like being more stone, to be more durable, and the efficiency of having laundry close to the bedrooms at the ground level and an easy way in and out without having to go through the whole cottage. And so this is the massing of the cottage. That simple form, rendered with materiality that I'm thinking about. So like dark vertical wood, or a cement board that looks like wood, so that the general mass of the cottage recedes into the forest. From a distance, it's not evidently visible. It really recedes into the landscape, connecting to the landscape. But near the entrance, there is a warmer wood texture. And one of the ideas I was playing with is I found out that the existing cottage wood floor was actually salvaged from an old marina building lodge. And so it had already been used once, and I thought, well, I wonder if there's an opportunity where we could reuse that a third time and continue that legacy of reuse. And so that's where I was thinking we could reuse some of that wood. Practically, I'm not sure it'll actually work out, but it is a nice idea that I'm still looking into. And then the screened-in porch being partially covered by wooden slats. Again, that komorebi of filtering light into the space without it becoming overly hot in there, but also not so cold all the time that you never want to be in there. You'll notice there are a lot of skylights along the apex of the roof, and that is, as the diagrams kind of showed earlier, bringing that vertical sunlight in, because the tall trees all around the cottage and the slope of the hill on the west side, there's not a lot of ability to bring light in from the sides. So getting the light primarily, the daylight primarily during the day, vertically, but filtering it in the komorebi sense. This has been a technical challenge in a sense of making sure that it doesn't overheat, but also there are very beautiful effects. Being at the peak of the roof, that was intentional, so that rainwater landing on the skylights will naturally flow off and then down the roof. Whereas if you had a skylight in the middle of the roof, there's a tendency for water to pool up behind it. And that's generally how skylights get a reputation for leaking. And so these at the top of the roof are not really prone to leaking. This is from the back side. And again, you can see the form of the cottage with lots of glazing here that looks out on the lake. This side is a lot more glazed because it's looking out on the lake. And the walkout basement level is a stone finish, again, to like ground it into the landscape and connect it to that sense of being in the Canadian Shield. I did a few renderings. Well, I put it into Enscape to render, and this is kind of what the main living space would look like. And so on one side, kind of the entranceway is here, the kitchen is here, there's some framed views into the screened in porch, and then framed views out to the lake. At the top you can see there's a wood beam roof system with primary wood beams and then purlins and then the roof plate on top of that, and that is to give it a sense of lightness by having that gap. There's a sense that the roof is lighter and more structured like a tree. As well, above where the skylights are, there's this wood frame that acts to filter the light in the komorebi sense, so that you're not overheating the interior space, and it also modulates the glare factor, so you're not sitting on the couch getting sunlight directly in your eye. An interesting part of that is it also makes the roof glow in a sense, because you have this light source at the top during the day that's the daylight, but at nighttime it's illuminated, and so it makes the roof really glow and gives that sense of being in a wooden building in the forest, which is quite nice. The screened in porch with a pass-through window from the kitchen, so if you're having lunch outside or dinner in the screened-in porch, it's quite easy to access. And then again, on all of these windows would look out onto the lake. And this is a view from the loft looking down, where you have a nice big gathering space where you can do puzzles or watch TV or something like that. A dining area and the screened-in porch. This is the entrance gankan, and the steps up, and then the central staircase gives some separation between the living area and the primary walking area, corridor per se, and it also filters light through that. As the light's coming through, the skylights filtered through the slats. Those slats are reflective in the guardrail, and then coming down, it gives a bit of illumination to the basement as well, so that when you're in the basement, that staircase stairwell area will be lit in a way from above that draws you back upstairs, back up into the main primary living space. It's worth noting, though, that as I did this design, one of the factors that became, unfortunately, important to the family, but rightfully so, was the grandmother is getting up there in the years, and the family, both the mom and dad and the aunt and uncle, will be eventually elderly as well. And so they decided they really didn't want any steps in the cottage. So they wanted the main living floor to be completely flat so that there aren't any steps. And I understand that. That's a very practical thing. And yeah, if you're elderly, steps are super annoying. But part of why I'm making this video is because those kinds of architectural elements, these having small steps, are quite important, although they're quickly diminishing in Canada and America. But if you go to like Europe, you are constantly going up and down stairs, and it's important to think about what that does to the space. As much as it is difficult to navigate if you're elderly or impaired, they have a profound impact in Europe and Japan as well in how you perceive space. So these steps in the next iteration of the design will be gone, and it will be a flat level on the main level. But at this stage, I did want to document how it affected the space. And lastly, I'll just end with this sketch that was looking at the site plan and how you navigate between the cottage here and steps from the screened-in porch down towards that patio area beside the seasonal dock and a fire pit, and having another path towards that basement entrance. I was starting to think about the landscape gardening elements that won't be so much of a garden, but will be an extension of the natural landscape there. That'll reduce the maintenance of having to spend your time gardening while you're at the cottage, but will ground the cottage into the landscape as much as I can. And then I was looking at where that potential future garage bunkie could be and how it could be connected to the cottage. I did this sketch before I went and visited the cottage, and so some things have changed since then, but I thought it was worth, at the time I wanted to explain that I'd been thinking about the landscape as a very in tune with nature, very subtle instigation into what's already there, rather than kind of a greenfield bulldozing of the site and redoing of everything. So to end the presentation that I gave to the family, I said, well, I've done some research, I've shown you my research, and I've made these initial concepts, and I'm here to figure out what your priorities were. And I had some lovely informative conversations with the aunt and uncle and the grandmother to figure out what was important to them, what was not important to them, what was flexible. And I also did a bit of a survey there. I had the dad help me out, and I did a bit of a survey because the legal survey that I got from the surveyors did not have the driveway on it, and there's some civil work there to smooth out the driveway, and I also needed to figure out where where the trees were close to the cottage. And so now I'm at the stage where I'm iterating the design. In the next video, well, I'll do a video that shows the renderings of the cottage, the design that you saw here. But I'm working right now on a site design, landscaping design, and I'm also iterating the design of the cottage itself. And once I do that, I can show it to the family again, and if they like it, then go into detailed design. But yeah, that is kind of the presentation that I gave to the families, and I wanted to document it in this video for if I come back to it and I can kind of see how my thinking has changed or how the design has changed in the future. I thought that would be interesting. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.